Two of the most exciting new vehicles in the EV space come from the same company, Rivian. Rivian took a different approach than other brands by quickly releasing two vehicles on the same platform within a short span of one another. One is the R1T truck, and the other is the newer R1S SUV. These vehicles share a lot of similarities, but I got a chance to compare them side by side. Today I'm going to break down all the similarities and differences between these two cars, and which could make more sense for you if you're looking to get a Rivian, so let's get into it, and a special thanks to Masterworks for sponsoring this video. As a quick overview, this is the Rivian R1T. It's a fully electric truck with a ton of great features. It can drive through 3+ feet of water, rock crawl a 100% grade, raise up to a 14.9-inch ground clearance, tow up to 11,000 pounds, and do a 0 to 60 in as little as 3 seconds. Inside it has a ton of up-to-date tech with 2 screens, and it seats 5. It's capable of fast charging and gets up to 328 miles of charge with the most efficient wheels. Technically, Rivian plans to ship a 400-mile version that is dual motor instead of quad motor and includes a larger battery, but we haven't seen that one yet. The length of this truck is 217.1 inches, and it starts at $73,000 for certain trims and smaller battery packs in the US. The R1S is very similar to the R1T. Most of the performance I mentioned applies here too, except that the R1S can tow up to 7,700 pounds and is quite a bit shorter. The R1S comes with 7 seats and gets a 321-mile range with the most efficient wheels. They also plan to ship dual motor with up to 390 miles of range. It's 200.8 inches long and starts at $78,000 in the US. Both vehicles come in quite a bit more expensive as shipped today, since Rivian is still shipping their initial specs, which includes quad motor. Up front, you literally cannot tell these vehicles apart. The front hood, powered front trunk, charge port, wheels, mirrors, windshield, driver controls, front seats, Bluetooth speaker, center console, armrest, underseat storage, instrument cluster display, and main infotainment display are identical in the R1S and R1T. So if you like the driving experience in particular, you may not know which one to get. From a driving perspective, it's nearly identical up front, and both cars include the Easter egg of a flashlight made out of the 7,777th battery cell in the car. Both cars also feature the wireless phone charger mat that I think Rivian should change immediately. Many customers I know have switched this to a more reliable solution like MagSafe pucks because the current solution just ends up with your phone sliding all over the place and stopping charging. The changes come once you get past the 2 front adjustable heated and ventilated seats. The second row seats in the R1T are entirely fixed. They are unable to fold, recline, or anything and remain stationary at all times. In the R1T as well, these are located right in front of the gear tunnel, so when you fold down the middle seat armrest, there is a sliding door that allows you to access that gear tunnel. In the R1S, these seats look similar but work quite differently. First off, since there's a third row of seats, these slide forward for passengers to access the third row. They slide forward in a few different ways and also fold entirely flat when needed for cargo space. If you prefer as well, these have various options for recline. As I noted in my full R1S review, they are quite manual to adjust but overall work well. Then the center seat armrest folds down and is devoid of any pass-through since it would be unnecessary in this car. In both the R1S and R1T, there is a rear screen that controls climate. I'd argue this screen is fairly unnecessary, but it's there in both cars and allows passengers to adjust their heated seats and climate to a degree. Heading outside, here is another big change for these cars. The R1T takes the space behind the rear seats and prior to the truck bed and makes that a large gear tunnel. This is pretty exclusive to Rivian and is one of the big draws of this truck. The R1S, of course, does not have this since there's a third row of seats. On top of that, the SUV is around 17 inches shorter, so that space has to disappear somewhere. Clearly, a gear tunnel wouldn't make sense in a 3-row SUV, and this smaller size also makes the wheelbase smaller in the R1S. One accent I particularly like about the R1S, though, is the large Rivian badge located on the C-pillar. There's no gear tunnel right there, so this badge is a nice accent that distinguishes this car. There's also a huge difference in the rear door shape. They are fairly small in the R1T due to the gear tunnel itself, but are regular-sized doors in the R1S, making it easier for second and third row passengers to get in. Right there, that completes the cabin for the R1T. There's a back window without any windshield wiper, and then the truck bed. One particularly interesting difference here is that the back window on the R1S has that wiper, but not the R1T. I'm not really sure why this is the case since both cars have a back window angled the same way, but the R1T's window just sits in the middle of the car with the truck bed behind it. I'm imagining you'd have the same need for a wiper here in both cars, but there must be a reason why the R1T does not have it. Regardless of how great Tesla or any other company is doing, the market can always be a roller coaster. Price fluctuations are normal in the market, and lately we've been seeing the price of big expenses continuing to surge. It's getting even harder to set yourself up for the future, but there are always ways to work through it. In the last year, aside from the energy sector's strong performance, one asset class that hit record highs last year is fine art. Now you can invest in shares of museum-grade contemporary art from legendary names like Picasso, Banksy, and Monet in minutes for a fraction of the cost thanks to Masterworks. Masterworks has sold over $45 million worth of art thus far and distributed the net proceeds to investors. In fact, every Masterworks exit to date has returned a profit to investors like you. When looking at their performance, the results speak for themselves. With nearly 700,000 plus users, Masterworks offerings have sold out in minutes. They even had to make a wait list for new users, but with my link in the description below, you can get special access today, so check it out. The R1T, of course, has the 4.5-foot truck bed, whereas the R1S has a third row of seating. It includes 2 small seats with fairly minor adjustments, but Rivian actually includes some features back there too. There are armrests that lift up for storage and have USB-C ports inside, cup holders, and vents for rear passengers. On top of that, while the initial part of the glass roof is the same size in these cars, the R1S adds a small glass roof just for rear passengers. This helps with headroom, light, and provides nice views for any seat in this SUV. What I find most interesting is the way that Rivian has taken features from each car and found a way to provide them in the other one. Some of the biggest draws for the R1T are things like the air compressor, hooks, outlets, room for a spare tire, and more located in the truck bed. Also the additional storage pockets located in the doors for the gear tunnel. Rivian has actually maintained all of these features in the R1S. In the R1T, there's an air compressor on the left side of the truck bed. In the R1S, it's actually in a similar place located on the left side of the trunk. Power outlets in the right side of the R1T truck bed are relocated to the left side of the R1S truck. They have a sliding cover, and next to them are seat folding buttons exclusive to the R1S. As for the cargo hooks inside the truck bed of the R1T, Rivian made a whole sliding channel system for the cargo hooks in the R1S. It's a pretty cool system that's very adjustable and allows you to tie down various cargo as you may need. Rivian is all about adventure vehicles, so this would hold down your cargo while you're truly pushing the limits of this SUV. As for the storage located in the doors of the gear tunnel, Rivian moved this to an insert that fits into the understorage compartment. This is additional storage that EVs have, and this insert fits the first aid kit and air compressor hose that goes into the gear tunnel doors on the R1T. Then you can lift that out to unveil more storage space underneath that's enough to fit a spare tire. For the R1T, you can fit a full-size spare tire underneath the truck bed. Here you can fit a compact spare under the trunk floor, and then fit more on top of it. Even the way that the tailgate functions in the R1T is essentially the same as the R1S. For the R1T, you release the tailgate and it fully drops automatically. You can do this from the screen, but to put it back up, it's entirely manual. Similarly, in the R1S, this is split into 2 pieces. The trunk itself opens and closes completely powered, but the bottom tailgate position releases automatically and then is fully manual to close. So the systems are of course very different between the two, but maintain a very similar approach that would feel similar when switching between these 2 vehicles. One feature the R1T has over the R1S is one additional camera. As part of the gear guard system, Rivian has a rear bed camera that will watch over your truck bed. The R1S obviously doesn't have a bed, so this camera is not present in this car as it's not necessary. On the rear tailgate are 2 noticeable and pretty obvious changes. For one, of course, the R1T has a big T and the S has an S, but the license plate location is quite different. The plate sits below the tailgate and on the bumper of the R1T since you can drive with the tailgate down. The R1S is on the tailgate itself. On the roof of these cars are mounting points for various accessories. Certain accessories like Rivian's own cargo crossbars take advantage of these and are super versatile since the R1T includes 8 different mounting points. That means that you could place both of these bars on top of the truck itself or on top of the truck bed. In the R1S, however, this is quite different since there are only 6 total mounting points. So you can mount them to the front or the back of the SUV and don't have quite as much flexibility with this smaller vehicle. This isn't a problem, but a difference worth noting. Overall, these 2 cars share the same same batteries, drivetrains, motors, and more, but you'll actually notice quite a difference driving them. The extra 17 inches on the truck is super noticeable when it comes to handling and turns. The R1S is just easier to drive and get around in, and handles better thanks to its smaller size. Both feel quick, but there is a certain speed difference in the smaller SUV that you can notice. It's just a tiny bit faster, even though it's essentially the same, so it must just be how it feels. One downside for the R1S is that certain features that are typically closed off from the cabin in the truck end up inside for the SUV. For example, the adaptive air suspension canisters. These make some noise when raising or lowering suspension in each of these cars, but when inside the R1T, it's hardly noticeable. Much of that is because the rear suspension is located under the truck bed and entirely closed off from the cabin. The same is not the case in the R1S, as it's located right under the third row seats. So when you're raising and lowering suspension, you can definitely hear it coming from the back a lot more in the R1S than the R1T. Then comes road noise. The R1T cuts off after the second row and is one of the quietest cars out there for road noise. With the addition of the third row in the R1S, a lot more road noise comes into the car. You can hear bumps and wind coming from an entirely different section of the car, and that's something that is just the nature of the design differences between these cars. It's only really noticeable since these are so similar from the second row forward. Both of these cars are really great and especially impressive considering how new Rivian is. In each car though, I did notice some issues. Each seems to have similar issues related to Rivian's newness to building cars. We've seen similar from Tesla over the years, and since Rivian offers such a great product, people will forgive these things for a certain amount of time. Between the two cars I was checking out, my own R1T and a rented R1S, there were a number of bugs, build issues, and other things. I didn't get footage of it, but in the R1S, the panel behind the third row seats came off at one point, and I had to press it back into the plastic clips underneath. When opening the door, I noticed I had to pull the handle twice each time, which was very annoying. It was as if the first handle pull unlocked and then the second actually opened the door. It's not supposed to be that way. Alignments around the exterior weren't the best I've seen either. I don't personally mind this stuff, but there are definitely alignments you would call panel gaps around the various connecting pieces of the exterior body. In the rear light bar, there was condensation, which means that something isn't sealed properly, and then the car had some interior rattles when going over rough roads. As for the truck, this car actually has more issues, and it's largely due to the few parts exclusive to that truck. The biggest one is the tonneau cover. This thing somehow still functions in our truck most of the time, but oftentimes will get stuck and make tons of scary noises. Many owners have had this break entirely, and Rivian is finally getting close to shipping a fix here. I have a software bug as well where the gear tunnel door only opens halfway when opening from the screen. I sometimes can't open the spare tire area either. If it rains, the doors collect rain, and you can hear it sloshing around when driving, and I have a loose panel underneath the passenger side of the car. This car also had a recall, but that was super easy to fix. With both cars, the suspension is noisy. I was surprised about this being in both cars because I actually thought it was an issue with our R1T. Both cars are noticeably squeaky when going over any bumps that the suspension is dampening. While the R1S is newer than the R1T, I actually think you could expect fairly similar build quality today when buying. Rivian is obviously taking great care with these cars, but they are ramping up production. I'm curious to see if the more cars they pump out, the worse the quality gets. Time will tell. Regarding which car you should buy, that will obviously depend on a number of factors, but I will say this. If you specifically want a Rivian and need a truck, get the R1T. The R1T is a great vehicle and very functional truck, but of course consider how the bed is smaller than many trucks out there. If you're torn between the two though, I'd maybe say the R1S is going to be the best option. It's harder to get, but will likely be worth the wait for you. Functionally, it's an incredible vehicle with the most storage you can get in any EV today. Folding down the back 2 rows of seating opens up a huge flat area to store cargo, and in some cases, this could actually be much better and larger for you than a truck. The truck bed is great, but you only have that much space. In the R1S, you have the full second row of space to utilize, as well as the third row and trunk space. I love my R1T, and that truck has been nice to have for specific things, but long term, I wonder if the SUV would actually suit my needs more. The versatility of being able to seat 7 people fairly comfortably is something hardly any other EV offers, and you really can fit 7 people in there. I would be fine for a reasonable amount of time in the third row as an adult, so this could be very useful when you end up needing to carry an extra passenger or two. Then you have great storage when you fold those down, and it opens up to a flat space big enough to easily fit a twin-sized bed. Rivian says that the R1S has 104 cubic feet feet of storage space, whereas the R1T has 62. So if that's really important to you to have interior storage space, it's going to make more sense. That's just my personal take after seeing how impressive the storage space in the R1S is with the seats folded, but there are of course many things to consider here. The last thing to remember with both cars is charging infrastructure. If you can charge at home and don't plan to road trip constantly, you'll have no trouble charging these cars at all, and it will be more convenient than having a gas vehicle. However, if you plan to take long journeys, either car will be subject to unreliable third-party charging networks until Rivian truly builds up their own adventure network. It's really important to keep in mind when buying an EV today, and Tesla still holds a huge advantage with their supercharger network. I really hope that changes soon though. If you were to pick one, which Rivian would you choose? Leave a comment below to let me know your thoughts. In the meantime, if you want to see my full review of the Rivian R1T after owning it for a few months, you can check out that video linked up here or in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.